Gear Second is the first major power-up that Luffy utilized in the One Piece story, increasing his strength, speed, and stamina to whole new levels to fight against the stronger characters in the stories, such as CP9. It's the first of Luffy's new gear techniques that he displays, as well as being the one that he uses most frequently. On top of that, it also has the most wide array of attacks out of all the gear techniques he uses. So how exactly does Gear Second work? Well, I'm going to try to explain it in the simplest way possible, but be forewarned, if you really want to understand the complete method of how Luffy achieves this form, then you'd probably have to have some kind of medical or biology degree to really understand the process of what's going on in his body. You know, I'm sorry, I majored in communications, I'm not an expert on this shit, but I did a little bit of research. I'll try to break down as simply as possible. But you want to know what's funny? You know who else probably has absolutely no idea how Gear Second works? Luffy, the guy who actually uses it and invented that technique. He has no idea. After doing all the research and understanding how complicated this is, I'm like, oh no. No. Luffy probably completely, like, just accidentally one day just went into Gear Second and was just like, oh, okay, I do this thing with my legs and then I get stronger and faster. Okay, looks like I'm set. Just like, it's a mystery power. That's all I need to know. Alright, so how does Luffy go into Gear Second, first of all? Okay, well, he first went into this form in his fight with Blue and O of CP9. That's one of the whole reasons he invented it. He got his ass kicked by Lucci, and he had to come up with another technique in order to really fight against the guys at CP9. So, what Luffy usually does is he assumes this battle stance when he first started using Gear Second. This becomes increasingly less frequent throughout the story. After the time skip, he doesn't necessarily have to take this form at all, but this is the way he initiates it. So, he braces himself on the ground. He, firmly plants both of his feet on the ground, places his one fist on the ground, sort of like, and then his other hand on his knee, and just sort of like braces himself. And then he presses down on his legs, which create this spring effect, and then you see this pumping motion in his legs, and then after that, his entire body becomes tinted red, steam begins to erupt out of him, and then boom, Gear Second. Wicked fast, wicked strong, and increased levels of endurance and stamina. Now, Luffy can only maintain this form for a brief amount of time, although apparently he can switch out of it whenever he so chooses. Although the process of how he disengages Gear Second is kind of vague. He just kind of like slows down and then just breathes out, and then eventually his skin color returns to normal and the steam begins to dissipate, so he can just basically go out of it whenever he wants. However, if he stays in Gear Second for a long amount of time, he basically becomes completely, not unconscious, but he can't move at all. Okay, so during his fight with Rob Lucci, Luffy utilized this technique a lot, going in and out of it constantly in his fight with Rob Lucci. Each time he went into it, he had to stay in it a little bit longer because Lucci was a really strong fucking opponent. Now, Lucci likened this ability to something similar to blood doping, which, thank you, Lucci, you amazing leopard man. Because of that explanation, I had to spend the entire morning researching blood doping. Yay! Blood doping! Oh man, look at all those crazy numbers and hemoglobin and the volume to oxygen rate in the human body and maximum aerobic inputs and... Oh, good. Okay. The general concept of blood doping is pretty simple, okay? The more red blood cells you have in your body, the more oxygen can be dispersed into your muscles. The more oxygen in your muscles, the more athletic and the more endurance and stamina you get. So the general concept is increasing your volume to oxygen maximum consumption rate. So that's what we're aiming for here. So that's the basic premise here. Getting the most possible oxygen distribution throughout your body through red blood cells that the volume of your body can actually contain. Of course, everybody has a different body volume, so everybody has a different rate in which this oxygen is carried throughout the body with the red blood cells into the muscles. I really apologize to any medical students or doctors that are watching this right now that are like, oh good lord, this kid doesn't know a fucking thing about what he's talking about. Here's the basic gist of how it goes. There's a bunch of different ways in blood doping can actually be triggered, okay? And of course, this is in real world physiology, and Luffy's body's made of fucking rubber, so we'll get to that in a second. But there's a few different ways that this can go down. So the first way is through drugs. Introducing certain drugs in your body can actually increase your red blood cell count, leading to the blood doping effect. Okay, this one is immediately out, though, because Luffy obviously doesn't take out a syringe and inject himself with some weird drug in order to gain Gear Second, so that's not what he's doing. Other methods involve actually utilizing blood transfusion, actually putting more blood into your body to increase red blood cell count that way. That's also excluded here because Luffy doesn't have like a pack of fucking blood on his back that he just, relies on as like a battery, although that would be kind of funny if that was the case. No. The way that Luffy does it it is because his body is made of rubber, his body can actually endure a lot more blood production. His heart can beat a lot fucking faster without worrying about his arteries or his veins rupturing or his heart bursting. That's what Lucci likened it to. You know, the amount of pressure that's going through your body right now through the pumping action you do with your legs, that's actually something that a normal person's heart wouldn't be able to stand the first time you initiated that or even attempted something like that to get your heart pumping that fucking fast. And we don't know how fast Luffy's heart pumps, but probably at least 3 or 4 times faster than a normal heartbeat, the normal human's heartbeat goes. And so, yeah, that's the way that he's able to endure it. However, it's not without its side effects, as we'll get to in a second. So yeah, basically increasing his heartbeat to the maximum cardiac effect increases the blood flow, increases the oxygen rate into the muscles. Now, there's a few problems with this that maybe somebody that knows more about this could explain to me, but the way that I'm understanding this is Luffy's not actually creating more red blood cells. He's actually not creating more blood. He's just taking whatever the blood he has in his body and is just pumping it to the point where it spreads around his body a lot faster. So another way to look at it, the way that I'm viewing this anyway, is that let's say before Luffy uses Gear Second, he has a big fucking feast, okay? So he gets all this food into him, he charges his body up with all the nutrients that he needs, okay? And let's say that if Luffy did not go into Gear Second, he would be good for 6 hours without needing to eat again, okay? So you're good for 6 hours. But then Luffy gets into an intense fight and he has to go into Gear Second. From the way I'm understanding this is because he's not using some kind of medicine to increase his red blood cell count, or because he's not utilizing any sort of blood transfusion, he's only relying on the blood inside of his body, and that has a limited amount of production rate, then that's just decreasing the amount that he has to eat next. So it'll be like, alright, I'm going into Gear Second, so now instead of needing 6 hours until I need to like refuel my body, it's now like 1 hour, because I'm burning up all that extra energy going to Gear Second, relying on using all this power now instead of dispersing it throughout, you know, like the 6 hours. I'm just channeling it all into right and fucking now because this is when I need it. That's the way at least I'm understanding it anyway, and that's why Luffy, after using Gear Second for only a few minutes at a time, is basically rendered immobile. We can also assume in Luffy's case, this also increases his body heat as well, because while his red-tinted skin is because of the increased blood flow, that steam that you see coming off Luffy is his sweat that's evaporating the second that he leaves his body because of the increased body heat, because his body's moving around so much, kind of burning rubber, so to speak. Maybe that's the reason they named it One Piece Burning Blood. That actually makes a lot of sense now. However, as Lucci stated, this form is not without its drawbacks. He even said that every time Luffy goes into Gear Second, he's essentially shortening his own lifespan. Luffy's a pretty reckless guy, so he doesn't really care. He needs this power to, to fight, so he's gonna use it. But what exactly are the drawbacks of blood doping? Well, of course there's drawbacks if you go the medication route with it, just injecting drugs into your body. There's side effects there, but just in the act of blood doping itself, it can actually lead to a bunch of diseases, one of which being called, oh, Jesus Christ, polycythemia? Yeah, sure, okay, let's go with that. Anyway, this is a disease that comes about through blood doping and the increased amount of red blood cells in one's body. It can eventually lead, in worst case scenarios, to heart attack or a stroke. Well, he couldn't move too well after his fight with Lucci, so, he was gasping for air pretty bad there. I don't really know what was going on with him, but, yeah, Luffy could be having a stroke. Chopper, you might want to help him out. Oh, wait, Chopper can't move either. Shit. Though at the end of the day, this is a manga, so I wouldn't worry about Luffy having a fucking stroke anytime soon. One Piece isn't exactly the kind of story that goes really great into detail when it comes to certain abilities like other manga do, like actually going into the science behind this ability. Lucci said it was like blood doping, and I guess Oda was just doing a little bit of research on it and being like, yeah, that's kind of similar to what Luffy's doing. You guys can do the research on your own. But he's not going to go into great detail of the after effects of blood doping, like what might happen. Could you have a stroke or a heart attack? It's probably not going to affect Luffy all that much. After the time skip, Luffy learned a little bit of way to better control Gear Second, no longer needing to pump his legs in order to initiate it. During the Sabaody reunion arc, all he has to do is just like kind of swing his arm and initiate it in the anime, and in the manga it seems that he can initiate it without using the pumping motion at all. That's another thing too that's kind of confusing. The whole pumping motions, the whole point of that is increasing the blood flow throughout your body, but you'd think in order to keep the blood flow going, you'd have to keep pumping your legs over and over again. But then again, I guess after you're in Gear Second and you're zipping around like a monkey on fucking crack cocaine, I suppose that would cause enough pumping, every time you land in order to increase the blood flow again and again and again. And despite all the drawbacks about Gear Second, I explained it, he can only stay in it for a limited amount of time. And actually, that might be another thing too, because I think ever since the time skip, Luffy's actually cut down every time he used Gear Second, because now he can use Haki, so he can like jump into Gear Second really quick to dodge an enemy attack or to launch an attack, and then immediately turns it off. So it's maybe like Luffy's not better at using Gear Second for longer periods of time, he's just better at budgeting his attack power, only using Gear Second when he really has to, and trying not to stay in it for too long, because that'll cause detriment to his body. However, despite all the drawbacks of Gear Second, it's probably the one of Luffy's gears that he can use the most without actually causing problems, because with Gear Third, while he doesn't turn into Chibi Luffy anymore, Gear Third can't actually be used in a fight, you know, that well. It depends on the actual opponent. If Luffy's fighting against a really big opponent, like a giant or something, or if it's a one-on-one fight, you know, Gear Third might be kind of handy, because it's usually used in like delivering one big decisive blow, you know. However, with it's not that great in terms of mobility, which Luffy really needs when he's fighting a really strong opponent. And then you get to Gear Fourth, which is just chock full of a bunch of different drawbacks, and we'll be getting to that soon. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. At least I hope you understood a little bit about what I was trying to get across here. I hope I did anyway. I don't even know if I understood everything, but the basic gist of it is, you know, Luffy's increasing his blood flow, more oxygen into his muscles, and then he can increase his athletic ability through that. Stays in the form for too long, it can lead to massive decrease of nutrients in his body, so he can't move, and possibly a stroke. So that's the general premise there. I'll be doing videos on Gear Third and Gear Fourth as well, trying to explain that to the best of my ability. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is Tekking101 signing out. Fucking rubber kid, man.